Welcome to this Wednesday edition of the Michael Brown Insider. I'm really glad to have in the studio this evening Doug Thomas with the, let me just give the website right up front, DUIDefenseMatters.com. It's DUIDefenseMatters.com. Doug, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I enjoy being here.
Let me ask you something. When I do these insiders, I really want to find out what makes a person tick. Why do they do what they do? How did they get into it? And, you know, what do you find immensely professionally satisfying about your profession? So before we do any of that, would you just tell my audience, who the heck is Doug Thomas?
Well, Doug Thomas is a practicing lawyer. I've been a litigating lawyer for 21 years. I came to Denver in 1990 to attend law school at the University of Denver. I'm originally from New Mexico, and that's where I grew up. I'm the managing shareholder of a law firm that has 30 attorneys, and my kids reside here in Denver and go to school in Denver. Enjoy being here.
You manage 30 lawyers?
30 lawyers. That's sort of like herding 30 cats.
It's gotta be.
It's a tremendous challenge, but I enjoy going to work every day. Managing 30 lawyers. Our law firm in total has 80 employees.
So where'd you grow up in New Mexico?
I grew up in rural New Mexico on a ranch about 45 miles southwest of Las Vegas, New Mexico.
Southwest. So that's where near where the current Imus Ranch is in Ariba.
That is true. It is close to that. True.
So I have to ask, because we have an undisclosed location I refer to as an undisclosed location.
Area 52?
Yeah, in New Mexico that we often escape to on weekends or long holidays. And in fact, we might be doing that pretty soon. How do you compare New Mexico hatch green chili to what they call green chili in Colorado?
Well, there really isn't a comparison at all, Mike. There's only one green chili, and it's Hatch. Anything else is not the real thing.
That's really true. So now, and you can plead the fifth on this, but now having established your bona fides as both a New Mexican and a Coloradan, what's your favorite Mexican places to eat in Colorado?
I have a number of favorite places, but the Brewery Bar on Old Santa Fe Avenue is still one of my favorites.
See, I've never been there, but I've heard great things about it.
Excellent.
All right, I'll have to go try it. So you came to DU to go to law school. Why did you want to go to law school?
I always found that there was this, well, first of all, I think I'm right about everything. Second of all, I have a big mouth and like to talk a lot. So what else was I going to do?
So you are a lawyer.
What else was I going to do for a living? So there I was at law school.
When you went to law school, this is speaking for myself. When I went to law school, I had this idea that law school was going to be drudgery, difficult, really hard. And I found just the opposite to be true. Not that it wasn't difficult, because there were obviously classes that were difficult and you had to study hard and work hard. But I actually found the whole process of law school enjoyable. Did you find that to be the case or not?
No, not at all.
Really?
So let me tell you a little bit. After my first year of law school, I actually worked 40 hours a week. I worked for a governmental entity. So I went to school at night. Yeah. Even though I was a full daytime student, I did it in 3 years. So I worked about 40 hours a week, went to school at night, and then went home and studied a little bit and got up and did it all over again. So I was pretty occupied. It was a very stressful time for me. And so I would not claim that law school was enjoyable. I loved the practice of law. Law school was not the highlight of it.
Was not the highlight. So you graduate from law school. What do you do then? I mean, obviously the firm's been in practice, has been in business now for how many years?
This firm was started in 2003. We've been in business almost 12 years now. As I came out of law school, I stayed employed by the governmental entity I was working for during law school. I worked for them for 2 years and then went into private practice in 1995 and have been in private practice ever since.
What was the impetus to go into private practice?
Well, I think I'm looking for more opportunities. I'm looking to be a business person. I'm looking to develop my own business, my own clients, and learn the business side of law, and not just be a lawyer working for the government.
Something I think a lot of people don't get is running a law firm is to some degree, and I'll let you expound on this, but to some degree is no different than running a widget factory or running a McDonald's or anything else. Do you think that's true or not true? And if so, why?
That's absolutely true. Only you have the additional factor that most lawyers have healthy egos. And so you're managing people that believe that they're lone wolves, that they're independent, and have healthy egos in order to be good lawyers and good litigators. So I think it's that plus an additional level of challenge out there.
What do you think the one thing that is involved in running a law firm what's the one thing you think that is so true for almost any firm, but the general public doesn't get, that this is the same thing we have to do that a private or another business has to do? What's that one thing that's uniform?
I think there's lots of things that are uniform. The business of law is not that much different than the business of anything else, the widget factory, as you call it. The lawyers have governmental regulations too, and we have our own specific regulations which are governed by the Colorado Supreme Court. So we have regulations too, just like any business has regulations, whether those are environmental regulations, tax regulations, or in our own special case, attorney regulations. So like any other business, we have governmental regulations.
And those government regulations, I mean, I know they are designed to generally protect the public, maintain the high standards of the practice of law, et cetera. But having said all of that, they still are something that you have to comply with. And if you fail to comply with them, there are consequences.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And when I went to law school, no one told me how much time as a managing shareholder I would find myself in the rules of professional conduct for attorneys. This is something that we deal with all the time as I manage 30 attorneys. So it is an important aspect of our business, just like regulations might be an important aspect of anybody else's business.
This may be an off-the-wall question, but a lot of people, I know some people who are listening right now will be wondering about this, but you know, we in the United Kingdom, for example, they've got the loser pays system. And we have a system here where people will come in and they can hire your firm. I assume in some cases they can hire your firm on a contingency. And if that plaintiff loses that lawsuit, really the plaintiff's not really at anything, maybe other than expenses. Do you think that's a fair system? Do you like that system? Should we tweak the system? What's your take on that?
You know, it's hard to determine whether it's a fair system. Certainly it's a system that allows people with less means to engage in the legal process. The problem with a user pay system is people with less means do not have access to lawyers and do not have access to the courts. So it depends on your perspective. Certainly if you're trying to discourage litigation, a loser pay system has a tendency to discourage litigation, where our system has a tendency to maybe promote or encourage more litigation. So I guess that depends on your perspective on that.
Do you think the courts are doing enough in terms of sanctioning lawyers for bringing frivolous lawsuits? Or, to maybe make it a more objective question, do you think that there are too many frivolous lawsuits? Do you think the courts are handling them correctly? What's your take on that?
Yeah, the answer to that question is I think the answer to that question is no. No, it's very difficult for courts to determine what a frivolous lawsuit is. And in any event, courts are very reluctant to impose attorney's fees or sanctions for bringing a frivolous lawsuit because they want to provide access to everybody, even if that access may be frivolous. So generally, the courts tend to lean towards an open court system, access to everybody, and are very reluctant, except in egregious circumstances, to impose sanctions or attorney's fees for frivolous lawsuits. So that's their bend. Whether you agree or disagree, they lean towards open court, access to those courts.
So we're just about to come up on a break in a few seconds, but I want you to think about this. Tell the audience how you or your firm gauges someone. Someone knocks on the door. They've heard this conversation today. They want to come and see you. They think you're a great guy. They like how you talk and your answers to everything. So that client, that potential client, comes in the door. How do you evaluate whether or not it's a legitimate case and one that your firm actually wants to take on and represent?
You know, that's difficult, especially in a half hour or an hour initial consultation. It's often difficult. We try to get to the heart of the matter in that initial consultation, but the truth is it's often very difficult to get to the nuances of every single case in a half hour to an hour. You try to get to the major points. You try to understand the character and the quality of the person sitting in front of you, and you try to make a decision from that point going forward.
Very good. You're listening to Michael Brown Insider. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Doug Thomas, DUI Defense Matters. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this edition of the Michael Brown Insider. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. We've in the studio this evening, Doug Thomas from DUIDefenseMatters.com. Go check it out, DUIDefenseMatters.com. Doug, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you this evening is I was told a statistic, and I can't cite it specifically, but generally it went like this. The Wednesday night before Thanksgiving is the night for the highest number of arrests for DUI in Colorado.
That's true.
Did I state it correctly? Is that the stat?
That is the statistic.
All I can say is, would you elaborate?
Perhaps people are trying to relieve the stress of going to the in-laws. That's all I have to say. It seems unusual, but it is.
It's not New Year's Eve. It's not Christmas Eve. It's not the day after Christmas. It's tonight.
Yes. Surprisingly, neither New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve are necessarily big days for DUIs. People are generally aware of that fact and thus avoid it. There are more DUIs given out in the summertime than there is over the holiday time, other than Wednesday night tonight.
I guess I have to admit, I was just dumbfounded by that. I would have assumed that, particularly with all of the PSAs and the campaigns that go on for public awareness about DUIs, I just assumed it was almost any other day besides tonight.
The public awareness is not as much for tonight as it is over the summertime. I think most people are familiar with the summertime public service announcements, 100 days of heat over the summer.
Right.
Campaigns are often ramped up around big days, Memorial Day, 4th of July, and Labor Day, and not so much around Thanksgiving, where people are often feeling stress and pressure and juggling both their family life and their work life.
So, and we'll eventually get to this. I want to talk to you about what Colorado DUI laws are, and DUI in terms of marijuana laws are. But I've heard, and I forget where I've heard it. So it's one of those things that you hear as background noise, but it kind of sticks with you. Something to the effect that, you get a DUI, it's going to cost you in terms of, and I assume this is because it's a government PSA, that they throw everything plus the kitchen sink into this stat, but that it's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars if you get a DUI. What's with that?
That's an accurate statement. So when you talk about the cost of a DUI, often those costs include higher insurance rates, attorney's fees, lost time from work, and maybe the lost ability to earn if you end up in jail. So that $10,000 is a figure that's been well established and maybe slightly low today, given other factors.
So what are let's divide our conversation into two categories, and tell me if this is correct or not. If not, we'll throw them in the same category. Can we talk about DUI laws in terms of alcohol, and then separate DUI laws in terms of drug driving or marijuana driving? Can we separate those two?
You can to some degree.
Okay.
There are different laws that surround alcohol as opposed to other types of drugs, including marijuana. So we can talk about them, but there's a lot of similarities.
Okay, so to the extent that we can separate them out, tell me about the alcohol-related laws. What are they? I mean, what's the BA? Now I'm talking like a lawyer. What's the blood alcohol content level? What does that mean? How do you determine that? What are the laws in Colorado?
Okay, well, let's start with the basics. For alcohol, you would be driving while impaired if you have a blood alcohol level of over 0.05. For alcohol, again, you'd be driving under the influence if you have a blood alcohol level of 0.08. So those are the threshold levels for alcohol. That can be established either by a breathalyzer or by blood alcohol test by testing your blood itself.
Who tests the blood in Colorado?
The Colorado State chooses a laboratory. They just recently chose a new one that does all the blood testing for DUIs and marijuana.
Well, then, Your Honor, let me rephrase the question.
The state gets
Your Honor.
to choose that.
Okay. Who draws the blood in Colorado?
It depends where you are when you're being arrested and what the circumstances are. It could be someone at the hospital. Or it could be someone at the jail, or it could be someone at the detoxification center you're at. So that depends where you are at the time.
Does any local law enforcement or state patrol draw blood in Colorado?
Generally not themselves, but they can.
They have the authority to do so.
They do. They have the authority to order it, especially in emergency circumstances, yes. So without your consent.
Okay, so I was going to say, let's set aside
without your consent.
Let's set aside for a moment the emergency circumstances. Right. So the actual taking, the extracting of a bodily fluid from me
needs your consent. Needs your consent unless there's emergency circumstance.
But, okay, so if they're drawing my blood to determine my blood alcohol content and I object, now have I violated the implied consent law in Colorado?
You have and this is one of the things that separate alcohol DUIs from marijuana ones.
Okay.
If you refuse a blood or breath test, then it has automatic license revocation effects. Generally 1 year, although that can be lowered to up to 2 months right now, which is why you might need a good lawyer like at DUI Defense Matters. You might need a good lawyer like at DUI Defense Matters. But the refusal of a breath test or a blood test for a DUI automatically revokes your license. Yeah.
So let's say I get stopped, I get pulled over, and there's probable cause. Let's assume there's probable cause. And I'm not in, I'm trying to pick the most remote. I'm not somewhere between Hawley, Colorado, and La Junta. I'm not out there in some stretch of highway where the closest hospital is 25 or 50 miles away or further. I'm stopped somewhere on I-25 between Castle Rock and Lone Tree.
Mm-hmm.
State trooper stops me.
Mm-hmm.
Probable cause.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to draw the blood. But my objection is to the state trooper drawing the blood. I want it drawn by a phlebotomist in a hospital somewhere. Have I violated implied consent when I say, no, I don't want you to do it?
No, generally not. Generally not. You're still consenting. And a lot of times in the metro area, assuming it's your first DUI, you're often taken to detoxification centers and you're not actually taken to jail. And there will be personnel there to take that.
And are they?
They are, yes.
Are they qualified?
Yes.
They're phlebotomists? They know what they're doing?
Yes. Yep. Used to dealing with DUIs and intoxicated people.
Okay. All right.
They know how to deal with drunks. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Let's get right to the point. They don't call it the drunk tank for
nothing.
Exactly.
It really is the drunk
They
tank.
get it.
All right. So another question that's often bothered me, and I have always, again, I think it's just because of my legal training, I get stopped at a checkpoint.
Yes.
And the first thing that the officer does, and first of all, I'm just saying this personally so you understand where I'm coming from. I just think, I don't care what the Supreme Court says or the Colorado Supreme Court has said, I think that DUI checkpoints are just unconstitutional. But that's that. Now, did you want to say something?
No, you go. Keep right on going, because they whether you like them or not, they exist, and they're there to protect the public.
I just saw a twinkle in your eye when I said that.
Okay. And you know, again, you could go to our website for more information, DUIDefenseMatters.com, but the criteria for having a valid checkpoint is on our website.
Oh, I've got to dig more into the website.
You do. There they are.
DUIDefenseMatters.com. So I get, the last time this happened to me, I was maybe in Arvada, Lakewood, I forget where it was, and nice young officer, you know, I rolled the window down, and I used to represent highway patrolmen and used to represent policemen, so I know what I'm doing when it comes to these things, and I rolled the window down, I've got my hands on the steering wheel, and he first asked me for my license and registration. I explained to him this in my glove compartment or my, console, whatever it is, I'm going to reach there. I want them to know that I know. I'm trying to establish that I know what they deal with.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Never make the officer concerned. Always a good thing to do.
Right. But then they say, as they're looking at it, Mr. Brown, if you had anything to drink this evening. I find that question, if you have to ask me the question at a stop, I've clearly given you no probable cause that I have been drinking. Now, I usually go ahead and answer the question. Call me a wuss, but I answer the question, and I'll say, yeah, I had a glass of wine, such and such, or whatever else. Right thing to do, wrong thing to do? What do you think?
That's entirely up to you. Certainly, the question is asked for a reason, and the more you answer it that you've been drinking, the more likely they are to continue on with their questioning or invite you outside to do a roadside test.
You know, I could go on with this conversation the whole rest of the evening.
Now, the roadside test is voluntary. You do not have to do that, and the failure to do a roadside test does not require the revocation of your license. You get to keep your driver's license, even if you refuse the test.
Hang on. We'll be right, but we'll follow this up further.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Welcome back to this Wednesday night edition of the Michael Brown Insider. In the studio with me is Doug Thomas. Doug, I can tell you right now, we've got 2 segments left. I could talk to you for the next week about things. which I may do in the future. Hopefully not because I need to hire you, but because I find it fascinating. Let's go back to our conversation about checkpoints. At the end, you said refusing at a checkpoint is not violating implied consent. Did I hear you correctly?
Not exactly. Refusing to do a roadside sobriety test. No matter where you are, if you've been pulled over and the police officer invites you to do a roadside sobriety test, refusing that does not require, the state will not take your driver's license from doing that. There's not a legal consequence per se in refusing to do a roadside sobriety test. There is one for refusing to do a blood test and a breath test. There's no consequence for refusing to do a roadside sobriety test no matter where you are.
From a practical point of view, though, because now I'm putting my mind in the head of a cop. So the trooper asks me, Mr. Brown, would you step out of the car and do it so I can, put the light in your eyes and ask you to walk the line. And I just say, because at that point, I don't want to get out of my car. Mm-hmm. I don't have to get out of my car.
That's true. Yeah.
But that's going to lead to what?
Well, that depends, because at that point, the police officer then has to make a decision. Does he have enough probable cause to arrest you, or does he have to let you go? So when you do that, you put the police officer in the position of making an immediate decision of which way he's going to go with it. And those are the two choices. And depending on all the circumstances, you may get arrested or you may get let go. But the evidence of the roadside sobriety test will not be able to be used against you later on because you didn't take it.
Right. Yeah, perfect. Real quickly, this is a trick question. Mr. Thomas, recite for me the alphabet in reverse.
That would be almost impossible to do. And
even when you're sober, it's impossible.
Even when you're sober, and the roadside sobriety tests are not designed to make you pass them or succeed. They're in fact designed to make you fail them. And in fact, 85% of all people fail them, whether they're drunk or not.
Whether they're drunk or not.
That's true.
Thank you, sir. Counselor, thank you. You have bingo.
Yes.
End of interview.
Absolutely. So that's true. The same is true. There's new marijuana roadside sobriety tests, and those are also designed to make you fail them just as well.
All right. Now let's swerve into that now, because I'm fascinated from a legal point of view, from a political point of view, and from just a private citizen point of view. So the recreational consumption of marijuana is now legal with certain restrictions, et cetera. How does that impact driving? We now have drugged driving? We've always had drug driving or driving while impaired, right?
Yeah, we've always had driving while impaired. And in fact, I think people forget that. Driving while impaired, you can be impaired by any substance which affects your ability to operate a motor vehicle safely. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about alcohol, we're talking about marijuana, we're talking about prescription drugs, or anything else. It could be any substance that impairs your ability to drive, and you could get charged with a DWAI.
Is DWAI different from I get pulled over because maybe I've just slightly crossed the line, I've weaved just a little bit because I'm dog tired. I've been driving for 20 hours trying to get to grandma's house. Is that impaired driving, or is that a separate citation?
That is not impaired driving. In order to be charged with impaired driving, there must be a substance impairing you. There's actually a Colorado Supreme Court case from about 2 years ago that determined that the flu virus was not a substance. So imagine this. You're in Arapahoe County and the district attorney charges you for driving while impaired because you're under the influence of the flu virus. And that case made it all the way to the Colorado Supreme Court. And
they said no.
No, they said no. Come on, let's use some common sense here, boys. That's not a substance which is impairing you. But any substance that does impair you while driving, you can be arrested for.
All right. Tell me what the Colorado law is about smoking marijuana and driving. Can I make it any more open-ended than that? Because I don't know. I don't know.
Well, you could always go again to our website, DUI Defense Matters. We have marijuana frequently asked questions there to get a more detailed information about marijuana and driving. But let me give you some basics. If you think about marijuana the same as alcohol, if you can't do it with booze, you can't do it with marijuana.
Okay.
So you can't have an open container of booze in your car, and you can't have an open container of marijuana in your car either. And in fact, the law we recommend, and the law seems to suggest, you must have it in a sealed container in the trunk of your car, not to get an open container. So, again, anything that you couldn't do with alcohol, you can't do with marijuana.
For example, drinking alcohol, the odor of alcohol raises a reasonable suspicion, leads to probable cause. Does the odor of marijuana do the same?
It does, in having, pipes in your car, which are in plain view, marijuana paraphernalia, bongs, rolling paper, anything that suggests you've been smoking marijuana would do the same thing.
All right. So now, and I haven't done this, but maybe I should. I haven't.
I haven't either.
Not what I'm about to describe, but
I didn't inhale either.
Right, but now that it's legal, actually I did inhale, but that was way back, way beyond the statute of limitations. But now that it is legal, I have been tempted to go try either some edibles or smoke just to see what it's like, because it's, honest to God, back when I tried it in high school, I was like, I don't get what this is all about. Tried it one time, never went back and tried it again. Having said all of that, I say all of that to ask you this question. How do they measure now if I'm at a party and somebody says, you want to just try this? And I say, yeah, I'll just try it. So I tried. It maybe gives me a slight buzz or a slight, that makes me feel relaxed. How do they measure whether now I'm illegally driving or not?
Well, that's often difficult. So just like with alcohol, there is a blood test that can look for the presence of THC in your blood. And the law provides if you have over 5 nanograms of THC in your blood, then you're presumptively driving while impaired. Now, that's very different than alcohol. In alcohol, if you're over 0.08, you are, in fact, guilty of driving under the influence, where with marijuana, you're not guilty with more than 5 nanograms. You're just presumed to be under the influence of it. So it's a little different. The blood tests.
So then what do you have to prove in court? I'm sorry to interrupt, but so if there's this kind of presumption, now what? Are you able to introduce as mitigating factors that, well, he wasn't weaving, he didn't cross the line, he was what? I don't get it.
Absolutely. And in fact, it would still, Mike, remain the district attorney's burden to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt that you were in fact impaired.
Okay.
So the 5 nanograms gives them a presumption, but they still must show you're impaired. And where our attorneys love defending the marijuana cases, where our attorneys really like the law here is that the blood alcohol or the blood test simply gives a presumption. And so there's all kinds of ways of showing you weren't impaired at all. Chronic marijuana users maybe have over a 5 nanogram limit easily, but have no impairment. They're able to drive safely, effectively. And so it really comes down to the testimony of the officer versus the testimony of the person as to what was really going on that shows you're impaired.
So what I find fascinating is, and these are my words, so I don't want to put words in your mouth. We have decided that when it comes to marijuana as some sort of DUI, that the state still has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that impairment exists. But when it comes to alcohol, it's different. There's no,
that's it.
You're guilty.
You're conclusively, in alcohol, you're conclusively presumed once you're over 0.08.
Which is my problem which is my personal issue with these alcohol laws.
So in an alcohol case, if you have over 0.08, it doesn't matter that you're able to absolutely, positively drive perfectly. It doesn't matter. You're still guilty. In marijuana cases, it does matter. No matter what the blood test says for your marijuana level, if you are able to show that you're absolutely able to drive safely and perfectly, you are in fact not guilty.
I was going to say maybe you ought to change the name of the website from DUIDefenseMatters.com to something else, but it really is driving under the influence.
Yes.
It's just that now in Colorado, that could be alcohol, marijuana, or frankly, almost anything else.
Absolutely true.
We'll be right back. Right back. Welcome back to this Insider. Glad to have everybody with us this evening. I just want to, because I want Doug to really answer some generic questions here. So before we get to that, in case we run out of time, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And I would remind everybody that, the holidays are here. Tonight, as Doug said earlier in the program, if you missed it, tonight is the highest number of arrests generally in Colorado for DUIs. I just find that amazing. So with that stat in mind, what tips does DUIDefenseMatters.com, Doug Thomas, have for people on a night like this?
Well, Mike, let's start with one of the basic facts about Thanksgiving. People not only drive to see their family, they fly. And one of the first tips I would give to somebody flying out of Colorado, flying out of DIA right now, is leave the marijuana in Colorado.
Okay. So true.
And in fact, we actually have had reports that there are canine dogs out of DIA right now sniffing around. So this is a bad idea.
And is that even true for medical marijuana? Even if you have a card?
Medical marijuana is different, but again, they're looking at people's bags.
Right.
Do you really want to go through the hassle?
Yeah.
Do you really want to go through the hassle of explaining it to them?
Yeah.
Right now is a good time. Leave it at home. Keep in mind that it's illegal in lots of other states, so where your mother might live or your father might live or where you're going to have your Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow, it may not be legal and they may not treat you so kindly, especially knowing you're from Colorado. So tip number 1, for those who are flying, leave it at home.
I would never have thought about that.
Tip number 2, for those who are staying here in Colorado, go to our website and look on tips on how to interact with police. And follow us on Twitter at DUI Matters for checkpoint information. So 2 good tips right off the bat.
So you guys, how do you find out where the checkpoints are?
Well, Mike, in fact, under Colorado law, they must publish where the checkpoints are in advance. So there are rules about how the police can do a DUI or marijuana checkpoint. And one of the rules are they must publish where they're going to be in advance.
I guarantee you, I will be following you on Twitter within the next 15 minutes. Bingo.
So absolutely. So that's good information. The third tip is the police are not out to look for someone who's may just be slightly under the influence of marijuana or slightly under the influence of drinking. They're looking for all the other stuff. It's usually people who are misbehaving in other ways
right,
that draw their attention. So again, if you've had a glass of wine at your mother's house or grandma's house, it's not necessarily a reason to panic, but the more you misbehave in other ways, the more you're going to draw the attention of the police, no matter what you've been doing.
Which gets back to my whole point about whether you're guilty, not guilty, or whatever. Those cops have a difficult job to do, so why not show courtesy when they come up to the window?
Absolutely, and that's our rule number 1 when people ask for advice. Look, respect the police officer. Be nice, be courteous, follow their instructions, and as you said earlier, let them know you're not a threat to them.
Right.
The more you agitate them, the more you appear to be a threat, the more you misbehave, the more difficult you're going to have it, and the more likely you are to end up in jail and not having turkey for Thanksgiving. You are the turkey. You won't be having the turkey.
So, worst case scenario, you do get stopped. For whatever reason, you do end up in the drunk tank. What advice do you have for folks who find themselves in that situation?
Again, be courteous, be polite. The only thing you can do in the drunk tank is sleep it off, call your family, let them know where you are, call DUI Defense Matters when you get out, and accept the fact you're in a situation that you no longer control. And the more you try to control it, and the more you let your anger and upset show, the worse it's going to be for you. Accept the situation, do your best, sleep it off, get up in the morning, call someone to come get you, call us, DUI Defense Matters.
Let you guys do the worrying. I mean, people are still going to worry, but let you guys take control of the process.
That's exactly
right. That's just true, whether it's a DUI or it's any sort of legal procedure, I think. Just get it to the lawyers as quickly as possible.
Exactly. Let us handle that from that point forward. Let us take that burden off of you so that you're not concerned about it. Let us deal with the case right up front so we can effectuate things before it's too late.
So we've talked about an awful lot of stuff today. And we started talking about you, your background, the firm's background. What do you think distinguishes DUI Defense Matters from people are inundated all the time with commercials and spots and everything else about lawyers. Why are you guys different?
The number one thing I'd point out is every one of our attorneys that does DUI or marijuana defense have all been prosecutors. They have all been prosecutors. Every single one have been a prosecutor.
So they've been on the other side. They've been on the other table.
They have been on the other table. They know how the other table works. The one has even been a supervising prosecutor and knows how it works. They've all dealt with police officers for a significant period of time of their legal career. They know what the officers are thinking. They know what the district attorneys are thinking, and they know how the system works.
All right. Anything else you want to add? The floor is yours, Counselor.
Well, the one thing I would think that's kind of unique to Colorado, and you said, Mike, at the beginning of this, you're not sure about this whole marijuana thing and how it's going to work out. There is one thing that's a statistic that's unique to Colorado, and that is the number of driving fatalities where the driver had marijuana only in their system. And for 2012, that was 36 driving fatalities in the state of Colorado where the person had marijuana in their system and only marijuana. So this is a serious issue out there, and I don't think the public is really aware of it. And I would point out that as you guys go to this holiday, as we go to visit our friends and our family, we could be visiting them right now. We're certainly going to have a great Thanksgiving tomorrow. We want to always keep that statistic in the back of our head so we don't get carried away and become the next fatality.
And I don't want to take away from anything you just said, but I do remember seeing that on the CDOT website about the 36 fatalities.
True.
Is there a causal link between the fatalities and the marijuana in the system in those 36 cases?
From a scientific standpoint, that may be unknown. It could simply be coincidence, but it seems more than coincidence.
Okay. 36, though.
36 in 2012. CDOT has not published the information yet for 2013.
All right. You've been listening to the Michael Brown Insider. Doug, I just want to say thanks. If you want to check out Doug, check out the website, DUIDefenseMatters.com. To everybody else, I just want to say drive carefully. Have a great Thanksgiving. I certainly intend to. Doug, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
It was a blast. Good night, everybody.